In this concept, we're going to learn how to write equations of quadratic functions. We're going to write these equations in one of two ways, either vertex form or intercept form. Vertex form we know is the form y equals a x times h squared, x minus h squared plus k, where our vertex is the point h comma k. An intercept form is the equation y equals a x minus p times x minus q, where p and q are x-intercepts. So to find those, we're going to be looking on our x-axis for where our graph crosses. For example 1, we're going to write a quadratic equation using a vertex and a point. So this immediately tells me we're going to be using vertex form and not intercept form. As we read through the problem, we see we weren't even given intercepts. So the problem says write an equation of the parabola that passes through 13, 8, so there's our point, and has the vertex of 3, 2. So every time you come to these problems, the very first thing you should do is write those 2 points down and label one of them as xy and one of them as hk. The vertex is always going to be hk. And then the other point will be xy. Next, we're going to start by writing out the form that we're using, which again is vertex form. And now we're going to plug in our values for x, y, h, and k. The one variable that we have left is our a value, and that's what we're solving for right now. So let me remind you about order of operations. Order of operations says to start with our parentheses, so we're going to start with our 13 minus 3. And then we're going to do our exponents, so we're going to do 10 squared, which is 100. And now for solving, I want to get a alone. So I'm going to move the 2 over first. We always add or subtract over first. And then we will divide by 100. A really common mistake here is people will add the 100 and the 2 and get 102. But that's not how we solve for a. So move our 2 over by subtracting. And then divide by 100. So there's our a value. Now our final answer needs to be an equation. So we're going to take our vertex form again. We're going to plug in values for a, h, and k. And that will be our final answer. Make sure that you don't forget the squared in vertex form. That's another common thing that people forget. They'll forget to put our little exponent of 2. Example 2 is also going to be using vertex form. It tells me to write an equation using a vertex and a point. So I'm going to label my point as xy and my vertex as hk. Start with writing out the format of our equation and then plugging in our values for x, y, h, and k. Be really careful with this problem. Remember, our equation is a minus h, and since my h is negative 6, a minus negative 6 would be a positive 6. We're going to take care of inside the parentheses and then our exponent. I'm going to add the 12 over next. And then divide by 36. So we get a equals negative 1/3. Your final answer, you need to plug in your a, h, and k into your equation. Remember, we're not plugging values in for x and y, just a, h, and k. For example number 3, the problem tells us to use a point and x-intercepts. So now we're switching gears and we're using our intercept form. So we're going to label our point xy just like before, and our intercepts we're going to label as p and q. Next, I'm going to write out my equation for intercept form. And again, we're going to plug in our values for x, y, p, and q. Notice right here for my first parentheses, I'm going to have a 2 minus -2, which means I'm going to use a plus sign here. To simplify this, we're going to start with inside of our parentheses. So we're going to make those 4 and -2. And then since they're being multiplied, I'm going to go ahead and multiply them together. 4 times -2, we get -8. And then divide by -8. So my A value is -5/8. Final answer is always an equation. We're going to plug in our A, P, and Q values. Now look back up really quick at our intercepts. I chose that -2 is P and 4 was Q. I could have switched that. We could have said that -2 was Q and 4 was P. It wouldn't matter in the end. So just assign them however you like. Example 4 says, a meteorologist create a parabola to predict the temperature tomorrow, where X is the number of hours after midnight and Y is the temperature in degrees. Write a function that models the temperature over time. So this problem didn't tell me if I should use vertex form or intercept form. If I look at the graph, however, I want to use what's labeled. Now I see that the vertex down here has a little gray circle on it. It's not labeled though, so I'm not going to use vertex form. I'm going to say that it gave me my intercepts and another point. So let's start by writing those out. So my other point is 0, 9.6. My P is 4 and my Q is 24, excuse me. So always start your problems by writing that out. Next, we're going to write out the formula that we're using, which again is intercept form. And now we're going to plug in our X, Y, P, and Q. Start with inside the parentheses. And then multiply those two values together. And then divide both sides by 96. Make sure we always write A as a fraction. Now for our final answer, we're going to plug back in our A, P, and Q into our final equation. So anytime we're given a graph, it's just like the first 3 problems we did, except instead of writing out the points we're given or the intercepts we're given, we have to look at our graph and find them. Example 5, write an equation of the parabola. Again, the problem doesn't tell me if I should use vertex form or intercept form, but I'm going to look to see what's been labeled or what points have been pointed out. I see here that I have 2 intercepts and a point. So those are what I'm going to use, and I'm going to end up using intercept form. So my P is -1, Q is 7, and XY is 5, 3. Write out our formula in intercept form. Plug in our X, Y, P, and Q. Remember, minus and negative is going to be a plus sign. And solve for A. For A, we get -1/4. So our final answer, once we plug in A, P, and Q, is going to be this equation. Okay, I'd like you to pause your video and try the independent practice problems on your own. Restart your video to see my answers. For our first problem, we get A to be 16/81. So our final equation is Y equals 16/81 times X minus 10 squared minus 4. For the second problem, I found A to be -3/5. So my final answer is Y equals -3/5 times X plus 1 times X minus 5.